Mr. Kersey, welcome to Panhandle Live. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Hans.
I mentioned this big news about the postcards going out, 130,000 of them to be precise. Can you talk a bit about the strategy behind this and why Secretary Warner is doing it in the first place?
Sure. So the 30,000-foot view, West Virginia Secretary of State's office is the chief elections officers for the state and responsible for ensuring that the state's responsibilities under the National Voter Registration Act are conducted. So under the National Voter Registration Act, the state has to conduct a general program that makes a reasonable effort to remove the names of ineligible voters by using various lists and data matching processes, which would include a change in residence of the registrant and the groups that do that sort of matching. So this program is specifically a child of the Electronic Registration Information Center, which is a data clearinghouse. It's a national, 20 states and Washington, D.C. are part of it. And you send your voter registration information and your DMV information to this clearinghouse. They do a bunch of matching, and they send you a list back. And that list looks like a regular spreadsheet, and it just has names of folks who have appeared to have moved either within your state or across state lines and not updated their voter registration. So these postcards are only going out to folks who have either moved in state or out of state without updating their voter registration. It's nothing more than a request to update their address.
So it's not a notice of termination of your voter registration. It's not a warning before some legal action is taken. It's literally a, hey, heads up, we may not have your accurate information.
That's exactly right. These postcards will not result in any immediate cancellation of any voter registration, with the one exception that if a voter says, I moved out of state, please cancel my old registration, or I've moved to another county, please merge my old registration. And all that stuff is an automatic process. All these folks have to do that get the postcards is go online on our website and click Update My Voter Registration, or return the postcard in the mail. It's postage prepaid, so they don't have to pay for it at all. And your county clerk will take care of the rest.
I've actually put a link to that on our Facebook page for those folks who have liked Panhandle Live. You can just check it out. We'll have the link clearly there. You can go and update your registration should you need to do that. Can you do that also through your local county clerk's office?
Absolutely. You can show up in person and fill in a new registration, or you can update your registration. The county clerk has the ability to do that in person.
And I bring that up just because some folks are worried that because it's from the state, it's some kind of different. I mean, this can happen as local as you want it to.
Right. Yeah. So I guess that's a good point to make. Even though it looks like it's coming from the Secretary of State's office, technically this is the county clerk's process. We're just doing it, this first big wave of these postcards, to take some of the costs and the resource burdens off of the counties, especially in light of this upcoming special election. Clerks are sprinting around right now and doing everything they can to prepare for the election. So we just thought because we have the ability to do it for them, we would this time. So this is a local process.
And anybody who missed the news cycle, October 7th, there's going to be a single-item special election across West Virginia on a road bond measure. If you're already registered to vote, you're good to go. If you haven't, when do you have to get registered in order to participate in that election?
The deadline is September 18th of this year if you want to vote in this October 7th special election. Okay.
And it's a Saturday election. There's a lot of events going on. I think Apple Butter Festival in Morgan County. So it's even more important to get the word out to say, hey, participate and be active. Will there be early voting as with any other election for this one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
We're talking this morning with Deke Kersey. He is the Elections Division Director and Deputy Legal Counsel for West Virginia Secretary of State Mac Warner's office. 130,000 postcards have been sent to some voters who've been flagged as having outdated information. It's about 11% of the total voter registration population for the state. Is that a high number, 11%, or is that about on par with what some of these other regions that participate are seeing?
It's actually on par. The best example that we have in West Virginia is the most recent national change of address process, which went out last 2 years ago in 2015. You have to do it every other year according to West Virginia code. So back in 2015, there were over 300,000 cards mailed out for the national change of address. Now, this is a little different of a process. The biggest difference being where the information comes from. But for the voters, it looks like the same thing. You get a card in the mail. It says, it looks like you've moved. Please update your registration either online or with this postcard, and then you'll be good to go. So, yeah, this 130,000 postcards is not it's not really surprising. But on the flip side of that, we've had almost 23,000 new registered voters since January. So folks are getting to the county clerks, they're getting online, they're registering, and they're interested in participating in our democratic process. So I think all these things are very good for West Virginia.
Certainly the last election got people motivated. We saw a huge surge of support for President Donald Trump here in the Mountain State. I think per capita number one, leading the country, 67% or something supporting the president. And he remains popular here. That has energized, I think, a base that's gotten people out to vote. Hopefully that will transition into other elections like what's coming up on October the 7th, that people will realize being a part of the process is important. What we don't want is to damage the integrity of that process. There are those who are concerned that these types of efforts to dig into the rolls and sending out postcards is going to intimidate people out of the process. How do you respond to that in the Secretary of State's office when people say you're doing voter suppression and you're trying to intimidate people so that they won't go and vote?
Yeah, I would argue strongly against any kind of notion like that. Our goal here in our office is the exact opposite of voter suppression. So voter suppression is an intentional or an organized strategy to influence the outcome of an election by discouraging or preventing people from exercising their legal right to vote. But what we're doing here is making sure that we work with our 55 county clerks to ensure the integrity of every election in West Virginia is just where one person gets one vote. So by cleaning up your voter rolls, by sending these postcards out and making sure that folks that are duly registered to vote are in the right address, and by getting the bad numbers off of your voter rolls, you're not only increasing the chance of your voter turnout being much greater, you're also letting voters know, hey, when you go to the polling place that day, you and everybody else there are only getting one vote. We're making it very hard for anybody to cheat. We're making it easier to register, easy to vote, but extremely hard to cheat. And that's all this does. It cleans up the rolls and it decreases the potential for fraud. So when you go in, you know the integrity of your election is great.
There's been in the news cycle talk of voter fraud on a national level. Certainly cleaning up the voter rolls would expose any of that may be underlying. At this point, has mass voter fraud in West Virginia been identified? Because when people hear, oh my gosh, look, 130,000 postcards going out, that must be illegal votes. The postcards do not equate to illegal voting activity or fraud in any way, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, not at all. These postcards have nothing to do with any kind of fraud or investigation. All they are is it's a procedural process where we are just making sure that our data is good, it's new, it's as up to date as possible. The fraud is a total other facet of our duties here.
And both responsibilities of the Secretary of State's office to clean up the voter rolls and ensure that things can move smoothly. And if there have been any, bad practices, that those stop immediately. Has this process helped does having clean voter rolls make it possible to identify past indiscrepancies, or are we just looking forward at this point? Like, is there value to going back and seeing if there is a history of voter fraud in recent years?
So the investigation process itself is not really intertwined with this postcard process, but by looking at voter history, we are able to identify people who have irregularities in their voter history records, which, based on our investigations, the majority of those don't turn out to be fraud. It just looks like clerk error or a local poll worker's error. it's very easy to put a 1 instead of a 2. And when you're inputting voter history for a voter on the local level, most clerks just use their the voter's voter ID. They put it in their voter registration database, and they give the voter a tally for that election. If you put in the wrong voter ID accidentally by a keystroke, or if the poll worker in the local level wrote the wrong or put the wrong ballot stub down on the poll book, you might have a blip in your data that looks like one person voted twice. But as we investigate, it looks like it's just really simple mistakes and things that are easy to fix, and the clerks are already on it. So, mass voter fraud is not something that we're looking for, and it's not something we found.
Deke Kersey is the Elections Division Director in the West Virginia Secretary of State's office, and that's good news, I think, because errors happen. Humans are involved in this process, and even computers can glitch. But to know that there is not a massive effort to undermine the integrity of the election process is important for folks, because I do feel like, as you mentioned, we've got new people coming on board. People are energized about the process, and if they feel like that's somehow not legitimate, it can certainly damage that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And one thing that folks don't know that I think would really make them feel more comfortable with the security of our elections is that our voting machines, when you go in and vote on a statewide or federal election, those voting machines, although many of them or most of them are electronic, they never touch the internet. They never touch the internet. So some Russian hacker or whoever from wherever who's trying to call into question the integrity of our election, they can't hack that machine unless they do it in person. I know that there was a big DEF CON hacking convention where they took a couple voter machines and plugged in USB sticks and did all sorts of stuff to those machines, but they did it in person. In West Virginia, we have over 1,800 different precincts, and every one of those precincts has a different voting machine. You would have to really have a lot of folks in person and not get caught to actually hack an election in West Virginia.
We'd have to have some serious sleeper cells ready to activate.
Absolutely. And then you'd have to be able to take all of the paper evidence, because we have a backup paper for every single machine. They have little rolls in the back, or they print a ballot out themselves, or there's a receipt. There's also a memory stick that's encrypted, and it's safe, and you can't get to it without a special tool. You would have to be able to get all of those materials and alter the results on all of those at once without being caught. And you couldn't do it because it's always in the public.
The Secretary of State's office has long prided itself on being at the forefront of new technology. Is that something that Secretary Warner is prioritizing as well?
Always. We're always looking for new solutions to old problems, and especially new problems. So with technology being the forefront of our election cybersecurity issues and the talking points in the nation right now, West Virginia is always looking for better solutions. Right now, we're hoping to secure a contract with a cybersecurity expert who would be in-house. We don't have any ink and paper yet, but we're confident that we'll have some solution there where we have somebody constantly monitoring our elections servers and firewalls and encryption software, making sure that everything we have in-house that's public and private data for our voters is secure.
And that comes more in prevention of a problem rather than in response to an incident.
Absolutely. That's we're not a response-oriented group here. We really are interested in preventing any potential attack from any direction.
We're speaking this morning with Donald Kersey. He is the Elections Division Director and Deputy Legal Counsel in West Virginia Secretary of State Mac Warner's office. Secretary Warner has made this voter list maintenance a priority from day one. Do you have any idea at this point how many files have actually been deleted in the eastern Panhandle County since he took office in January? Because I know anecdotally we have long talked about Maryland tags or Virginia tags from folks who clearly live here but never bother to update their driver's license, for example, over at the DMV or their tags. You figure that they may not also update their voter registration or bother to make some changes. So being a border county, that's a big concern for us.
Sure, it's a big concern for everybody around the state, and I certainly appreciate the heightened concern on the borders there. So to answer your question, it looks like Jefferson County, as of August 7th, canceled just over 1,000 outdated registrations. Berkeley County's got 6,800 cancellations. So, I mean, you all up there are doing a great job. Your clerks up there are doing a great job. And for the whole state, it looks like we've got 65,000 voter registrations, which were outdated or otherwise inappropriately on the rolls, have been canceled.
And those also include deceased individuals as well, who just the notice for one reason or another never got to the clerk's office.
Right. Yeah. So before we took office, there was a sort of a difficult process in place, and it wasn't really well laid out for the clerks on how to cancel a deceased registration because the notification didn't really come in a uniform manner. So many county clerks were going through obituaries on a daily basis and just looking for the piecemeal voters whose registrations should be canceled because of death. So now that we're part of this electronic registration information center group, we can actually order the Social Security Administration's death master file, and that includes folks who've been deceased throughout the entire United States. So if they're registered in West Virginia and we match their registration with the data that we get from the SSA file, then we can push that through electronically to the county clerks now, and they can take action on their actual user end of the voter registration system.
Mr. Kersey, we've mentioned a few times in this process that even though the Secretary of State is taking on some of the cost and mailing this out, it's the clerks who are, it's their process. You know, the clerks are key in helping to clean up some of these voter rolls. Talk about how important the relationship between the county clerk's office and the Secretary of State's office has been in this whole process.
It's been great. The clerks have been absolutely wonderful, every one of them. They are excited about the new tools. They're happy that they have the new tools. Of course, we have some clerks who have very difficult questions for us. Some of the harder questions are like, is this legal? And that's where we do our best to provide them with our answers on and using the law and showing them, hey, you're not going to get in trouble if you follow this because here are the rules. So in doing that, it seems like the clerks have gained confidence in us that we're not just in the Wild West doing what we want to do, but we're following the rules, and that they in turn are also following the rules.
And of course, it's not all about just having them clean the voter rolls off. We're still taking voters in. As you said, 23,000 across the state signing up, new registered voters. Are we seeing a similar trend in the Panhandle counties with new voter registrations?
Yeah. Let's see here. Which ones are you interested in? I can give
Berkeley,
you
Morgan, Jefferson?
Yeah, so Berkeley, since January 16th, 2,313. That's pretty good, actually. Let's see here. Morgan, looks like you've got 324. Jefferson has 1,131. So that's pretty good numbers.
Yeah, and that Jefferson actually surpasses the number of voters registrations that were cleaned out of the system. So they're actually
right.
making gains there, which is again significant, I think, because people are getting energized one way or the other. Maybe one of the advantages of polarization politically is that people decide they need to stop armchair quarterbacking politics and actually get involved.
Absolutely.
We've got October 7th, but otherwise it's kind of an off election year outside of municipalities. Will we see efforts from the Secretary of State's office to sort of get out the vote next year when we have another election cycle coming through?
Absolutely. We have our field rep team who will be around the state. They're placed throughout the state as a local contact for our office just in case a clerk or a voter needs anything, really. We will, in fact, for the special election, we're putting out notices and we're getting out on radio shows like this and in the newspaper, and we're doing all that we can just to let folks know that this is an important issue for the state and that we should all get out to vote.
Yeah, the road bond's big. It's going to be $3 billion, which we'll have to pay off if we choose to do it. If we don't do it, we've got to find some other way to pay for the roads. If we do it, how do we make sure that it goes where it wants? These are questions for your local delegate or your state senator, but at least in terms of the vote, that's where the Secretary of State's office comes in. A couple more questions while we have some time. We're talking with Deke Kersey, Elections Division Director and Deputy Legal Counsel in the Secretary of State's office. 130,000 postcards sent out, postage paid coming back. And as you mentioned, you're picking up some of the cost for the counties so they don't have to do this. What is the price tag? Do we know exactly how much these efforts are costing, and what do you think the payoff will be for having cleaner voter rolls down the road?
Well, to answer your second question first, I don't think you can put a price on democracy. Whatever the cost, there's no value greater than being able to vote and voice your opinion. So I don't think you can put a price on democracy. But to answer your first question, these postcards themselves, just the cards themselves, cost about $11,000 for 130,000, which was a good deal based on all the bids that we received. And the postage going out was about $59,000, which sounds steep, but that's $59,000 that the county clerks don't have to pay out of their pockets. It's
right.
Money that we were appropriated for the Help America Vote Act, and we have a fund just for things like this. Return postage, it's a business reply mail. We don't actually have any idea of how to estimate that because we don't know how many cards are going to come back.
You might get none, you might get all of them.
Exactly. So if we do get all of them, we'll have to find some money somewhere. But we're hoping folks will just go online and update their registration online on our website. It's very easy. It's very self-explanatory, and you don't have to put the card back in the mail.
Right. And as you say, there is no price on democracy. It is the job of the Secretary of State's office to make sure that our right to vote is as free as possible and accurate as possible. Protect that right. That's one of the charges. But there will also be a cost savings to not having all of these superfluous voter registrations that aren't important. And so, I mean, long term, we will streamline. We will, I think, realize savings at the county level as well. So there's a benefit financially as well as to the Secretary of State being able to actually fulfill his duty.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of good examples of that would be exactly what we're doing right now. We're mailing 130,000 postcards to folks who look like they've already moved. So as we keep these, and I should explain, these postcards are first-class forwardable mail. So we're not just mailing cards to folks who aren't going to be able to get them. It'll forward it to their address, and if they don't have an address, a forwarding address, it'll come back to us as undeliverable. And then that's, it's technically the voter's responsibility to make sure their registration's up to date. So we're doing all that we can to let them know this is going out. So if you don't get a postcard and you know you've moved, go ahead and get online and update your registration. You don't have to do that if you don't get a postcard. Anybody can update online. So, but anyway, saving costs. Another good reason keeping your rolls clean, to keep your rolls clean to save cost is because your county clerks have to purchase ballots, and your municipal towns and cities, they have to purchase a number of ballots based on the registered population. So if you have 1,000 voters in one municipality registered, but you really only have 200 voters, your county clerk, or your municipality actually has to buy 105% of those ballots. So they're going to buy 1,050 ballots when you only have 200 registered voters. But if those rolls were clean, they would only have to buy 210. So it says cost savings across the board by keeping your voter rolls clean. And
it's, I think, as you say, the actual job of keeping the election system, the democratic process, as free as possible and with total integrity is vital. One last question for you, Mr. Kersey, before I let you go. The Presidential Advisory Commission on Election Integrity had asked states for voter information, and Secretary Warner's office notified the commission that they would be able to access the information that's already available to the public and would have to go through the set process in order to get that information. Can you explain that to the layperson and talk about what kind of information is available to any individual who would want it?
Sure. So the application to get a voter registration list, which is what we've told the commission they have to go through to get this list, is you get the application online, you fill it out, and you pay for the list. Groups that usually request these voter registration lists, which have been doing it since 1994 when the law was passed, would include candidate committees, executive committees, local political parties, or just interested voters who want to make sure that the people in their town live in city limits when they come to vote. These lists have been available for a long time, and they only include your name, your residence as it's on your voter registration, your political party affiliation, and if you want the voter history, you can pay an additional fee for that. And voter history, I should clarify, is not who you voted for, it's when you voted. So if you voted in the general 2016 election, for president, then it'll just say voted in the 2016 general election in November. It won't say who you voted for. So that's what would be included in the list. What will not be included in the list is Social Security number, your driver's license number, or any other ID number issued by the DMV, a telephone number, email address. All of those things are private information as prescribed by our legislature, and we absolutely will not turn it over no matter how hard or how much anybody asks, whether it's the federal government or anybody else.
And at this point, has any of the legal information been turned over to the commission, to your knowledge?
No. We have not turned over any voter registration list whatsoever. We've received the letter requesting it, and we responded politely and said, that's fine, but you have to follow the same rules as everybody else. Here's the application. Here's how much it's going to cost. And we haven't heard back from them yet.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the update on that because things fall out of the news cycle and then they'll rear back up. So we know where we are if that happens. Deke Kersey, Elections Division Director and Deputy Legal Counsel, thank you for letting us know that these efforts are underway so that if anyone does get a postcard, they know it's A, not a scam, and B, it's not a warning. You just need to go and make sure that your address and other information is correct. You can do that here locally at the at your county clerk's office. You can do it at the Secretary of State's website, and you can click the link on our Facebook page. Mr. Kersey, thank you so much for your time today. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Fogle. I appreciate you.